This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Brothers Comics in Port St. Lucie, Florida. How and when did the boys find out about Magnum's accident? And when did you find out they were going to turn Nikita babyface? And what was the reaction from you and the other wrestlers?
Oh, God. Well, I mean, just not everybody found out about Magnum's accident the same way. Obviously, it was, I'm trying to think of what time of night it would have been. We were coming back from Greenville, South Carolina. It was after the 11 o'clock news in Charlotte would have already aired that the accident took place. It would have probably been midnight to 1-ish in the morning because Magnum was almost home and he'd already dropped Dusty off. So the first chance was the morning newspaper. And so some guys read it in the newspaper, some guys that were particularly close to Magnum and had heard, because the calls that night, I mean, obviously by that point, Crockett knew, and I don't even know the chain of who called who, but Doug Dillinger was still a Charlotte police officer at that point in time. So the Charlotte police had it pretty quick. I'm sure Doug would have been called. I'm sure he would have then called Jimmy Crockett. Crockett would have called Dusty. So guys were hearing overnight. Some of those people who knew that, okay, this is a close friend of Magnum, he needs to know without seeing it on the news, they might have got a call. But everybody else, the morning newspaper, the morning TV news, it started and it didn't stop for days.
How big a local story was it in the newspapers and on TV?
It was the biggest local story on the. I mean, there wasn't anything else going on at that time that, they were talking about whatever the president was doing. But as far as in Charlotte, North Carolina, no, Magnum T.A. in that car wreck, the pictures of the car, the Porsche that was mangled and you couldn't believe he got out alive, were on the front page of the paper. Every TV news every TV station that had a news broadcast in town covered it on each newscast, morning, evening, night. The hospital, they had to ask people not to call the hospital because the switchboard, they couldn't do any business. There were people camping out front of the stairs, bringing gifts and flowers and signs like it'd be out front of Graceland. It was, that's why the Flair and whoever went with him, was it Tully, Arnold? I can't remember who all went with him, but they, to kayfabe, had to wait till actually the middle of the night a couple of days later and sneak up the back stairs to be able to get in to see him without anybody knowing what the fuck was going on. But no, it was days that, the updates and what's the prognosis and blah, blah, blah. Before the wrestling show took over and started giving steady updates, it was in the newspaper, on the news, radio, whatever.
How did you find out?
I found out, as far as I remember, the next day of fucking shit did I see the news or did one of the boys call me and tell me turn the news on? It would have been a Tuesday, so we were going to go to television. So we would have been close in Charlotte. Anyway, the other part of the question was, when did we find out about, I should go get the Midnight Express book, but I won't because for the purposes of this conversation, it was in Charlotte and we had a TV taping scheduled. And I don't think, once again, I'm sure, yes, Jimmy Crockett knew, Ric Flair knew, Dusty knew what he was going to do. He told Nikita and everybody that was in the JJ, because he was Dusty's assistant booker. A lot of the guys found out that it was going to be Nikita when he walked out on television, because that's the way things worked in those days. And as soon as we heard the people, regardless of what, see, that's the thing. If we'd have heard about it a week ahead of time, or if they'd called a meeting and said, hey, what do you guys all think about this? We're going to turn Nikita and put him in the spot as Dusty's friend. Well, some people would have shit on it and some people would have liked it or whatever. But when you heard the fucking roar, the way that they built it up and introduced it, when Nikita walked out in front of those people, then you knew, okay, that's exactly what he should have done. Because it was fucking momentous. And everybody, I mean, down deep, you know, they made real life a story. And I can't remember the promos word for word and how that Dusty introduced it. But the point is, everybody in that building knew that Magnum, the other half of America's team, Dusty's best friend, was fucked up and may never wrestle again. And what's going to happen? And when they saw Nikita come out and that now the superpowers, Dusty was political even then. He could walk that line, baby, walking the edge of the lightning bolt. They roared. Well, you can tell on tape. Those crowds in the Carolinas in those days would max out the audio meters. So a lot of times they were so loud, all you got was static.
There's really cool footage from the Raw George Michael Sports Machine stuff at Crockett Cup 87, where they have the entire Magnum T.A. coming down to ringside before the main event at Crockett Cup, which I think was Dusty and Nikita versus Tully and Luger.
Yeah.
And it is pretty cool to just hear that reaction for T.A. in Baltimore, which, you know, could be a hard city for babyfaces at times. But it is a really cool bit of raw footage there to hear the reaction.
Oh, and at the 88 Cup, they had him walk to the ring in Greensboro, and I got to take a bump for him. He shoved me down. I can't even remember what the circumstances were. I'd have to go back and look at the fucking notes. But just him in Greensboro especially, that still gives me goosebumps.